Should all prisoners be forced to appear for sentencing? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. Carl Clifford failed to appear in court to be sentenced yesterday. He was jailed for a whole life order for the rape and murder of his ex-partner, Louise Hunt, and for the murder of her sister, Hannah, and their mother, Carol. John Hunt, their father and husband, reduced the courtroom to tears as he read his impact statement. He said, all their lives, Carol, Hannah, and Louise spent their time bringing joy and colour and happiness to other people's lives. The screams of hell, Kyle, I can hear them faintly now, and the red carpet will come out for you. He said, as you consigned to fate far greater than death, I can draw on the love and strength that I feel from the girls in every moment of every day. John said, I so wanted to deliver these words eye to eye with Kyle. I will continue to act as if I'm doing so. But he didn't have that chance. The judge decided that because Clifford is now in a wheelchair, he didn't want to force him into restraints, and he feared that Clifford may be disruptive. Now, the law, as it stands, does give judges the power to use force to compel people to turn up at court, but they don't have a specific law backing them up. Now, the Conservatives tried to bring that law in, saying that if an offender's crimes could get them a whole life sentence, they could be forced into the dock or they would get 2 more years behind bars. But this fell through because the election was called. Now, Labour is trying to bring that new law in. Dawn, it's a horrific story. It was an incredible statement by John Hunt. I urge people who haven't read it, it's available online, to read the whole thing. But what are your thoughts on that question? Should criminals be forced to come into the dock for sentencing?
Yes, I think they should. Obviously, there are always going to be the odd example, whereas if a prisoner is literally on their deathbed, or if they have mental issues with understanding what is going on, or if they're giving birth, for example, there are always going to be exceptions. But on the whole, yes, I think they should be there for the sentencing. And John Hunt's words will haunt everybody who ever heard them forever. And he and the surviving daughter are going to live with this for the rest of their lives. There is no escape for them whatsoever. So they at least should have had the right to tell that piece of filth who did this to his face what they thought of him. And I do not care, Alexis, if he had to be shackled. I know he's in a wheelchair, he's paralysed from the chest down by his own hand, but I don't care if he had to be shackled and gagged and masked. He should have been there to hear what John Hunt had to say. I'm sorry, there is absolutely no excuse.
Henry, do you agree?
I'm not sure I'd go as far as shackling, gagging and masking. That sounds very American.
But the judge said, though, sorry to interrupt, the judge said the reason he didn't try and force it is because he didn't want this piece of filth, I'm not going to use his name, creating a circus. If you gag them, he can't create a circus. He's got to sit there and have John Hunt look him in the eyes and tell him what a piece of filth he is.
I understand that. Although, for the period of the trial, I believe he was in court, was he not? And in the case of others, murderers, killers who've avoided court, so, for example, Thomas Cashman, who killed Olivia Pratt-Corbell, or Lucy Letby, and I've got all this controversy about her, but, she didn't turn up for sentencing, but she was in the dock for the period of time that she was on trial. I think we've seen them, and perhaps some people might say, we've seen enough. We know who you are, you know who your accusers are, and you've been found guilty. Do we need to bring them back to court on that day when we know who they are? They are not going to be allowed out again. A jury of your peers have found you guilty. What would it serve bringing them back under duress in a civilised society?
Isn't it for the victims? It's the first and only time that the victims have a chance to make that impact statement. And if they're making it to an empty courtroom, just like John Hunt did yesterday, then that lessens perhaps the impact of that statement. I mean, Dawn, you say that, bound, gagged, whatever means possible, bring them there. But wouldn't it also be detrimental to that impact statement if you have someone creating a whole fight? You can bound gag someone. That's not going to stop them from making noise, screaming, closing their eyes, shouting, or doing whatever disruption.
Gagged, yes, if they're gagged, it is. They cannot open their mouth. I mean, I don't even care if it's like something from Silence of the Lambs, that sort of mask that they had to wear in that.
You'd go that far?
For people like him, no, I don't care. And for people like this, Alexis, for the first time in my life, I actually, and I hate myself for thinking this, questioned whether there should be a death penalty. And I don't support it, and I think we should not go down to that level. I hate myself for even thinking about it. However, for what he put those 3 women through, 4 hours, 4 hours of torture.
Let me read you another bit of the impact statement again, because you mentioned the 3 women. I often think of the list Louise wrote to herself to remind her of the reasons that you fell short. The racism. She was rightly disgusted by that. Your belittling language. The fact that your family is a mess. Like any woman should be allowed to do, she worked you out. And despite repeated deceit, and said, enough is enough. I hope women around the world will take Louise's bravery as a shining beacon for their lives. If you feel enough is enough, then it is.
Those words that you just read out ring powerfully way beyond the court. They will probably reach this specimen, this man, because he's going to have.
Will they though? How will
they? Perhaps.
How will they? How can we be so sure that he's actually going to hear any of this?
Well, you know, even if he was free out in the community, he could shut his ears. But he's going to be in prison in a controlled environment at the pleasure of the state. He will have prison guards, prison officers, and whoever engages in rehabilitation. For what it's worth, he's not going to go out. He's never going to leave. But I don't think he'll be able to escape that in the end. And in the dark recesses of his own mind, those words will find him.
I just want to read you the last 2 parts of the statement, because I think, again, just gives you an idea of that impact statement and what was read in court. John Hunt went on to say, just remember one thing. Whatever sentence you are about to receive, whatever misery lies ahead for you for the next 60 years, remember that after your days on earth are done, on your dying day, there will be no release for you. The screams of hell, Kyle, I can hear them faintly now. The red carpet will come out for you. At that point, when the person you could have been meets the person you are, you will realize your miserable fate will last for eternity.
So powerful. It's like something from the Old Testament, isn't it? You know, it is deep, it is elegant, it is powerful. It's almost like vengeance is mine, said the Lord.
And how much closure would he have had if he'd have been staring directly into that piece of filth's eyes?
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. But over the years, we've developed a form of justice that I think we kind of broadly agree should not be hot, should not be out of wrath, anger, rage. It's about justice. There is a retribution to it. There'll be no rehabilitation for this guy. He's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. But we as a society have agreed this is how we do things.
OK. Let's speak to Gina in London. Gina, good morning. Gina, what are your thoughts? Do you think prisoners receiving that sort of sentence should be forced to court in whatever means?
Yeah, I think they should be forced. I think once they've been found guilty and they're on their way to prison or in prison, they should not have that choice. I don't believe prisoners should be abused in prison or anything like that, but I do believe they should not have to say whether they turn up or not. I think it should be, they shouldn't have that right. And if the families of the victims have to read out a statement like that, it might help the criminal to see what they've done. It might help them to acknowledge what they've done, and rather than think, I've gone to prison, I'm serving my sentence, I have the choice whether I come in, go to court or not. I think they should be forced to, definitely, and it should be law. I was actually shocked when I found out that Lucy Letby said she wasn't going to court, and I didn't even know at that time she had that choice. I think.
Gina, let me ask you this question. You bring him there in the courtroom, and whilst a victim is reading the impact statement, they get up, start shouting, maybe started shouting abuse at the victims, at the judges, at the court. What do you do then? Because, you know, it's all very well having them there, but if they don't want to listen, if they want to hurl abuse at the victims, aren't you making that moment, the victim impact statement, aren't you ruining that for the people who need to be heard?
Yeah, well, that's something that you might have to look into. And if they do start shouting and screaming, remove them, put them in somewhere that they can hear, but the courtroom can't hear them. So, but they should not be allowed to say, "I'm not going." That's my thing. And yes, if they do start, just remove them. But they must hear what the victim's family have to say. And more than that, for me, they should not have that choice to say, "I'm not going. I'm not going." That's
Gina, thank you. Thanks for your call. Let's take another quick one before we go to the break. Nick in Devon. Nick, good morning. What are your thoughts, Nick? Should they be forced to go and listen?
Well, good morning, everybody. I think ideally, obviously they should be there to hear the sentence, but I think all reasonable people will realise that, in fact, people behave in different ways. And I haven't heard all of the discussion about it, and it may have already been said, but I do think, the whole idea about bringing people up to stand in the dock screaming, shouting, or whatever they're doing, and behaving badly, particularly in front of, say, affected relatives, is probably not the best thing for it to see. And I'm just worried that, what would happen in those cases. The other thing also, and not sure it has been mentioned, and something I'd like to know about, is that a lot of people on remand that are then sentenced are actually found to be innocent. So are those people also that are innocent and proven innocent? Do they go up and, have to do it if they don't want to and stand there? What happens to them?
Nick,
I don't think they should.
This is specifically for people who have been found guilty and are being sentenced. So there's no question about their guilt. This is for people who have been found guilty in a court of law and are there to receive their sentence. And that's when the victim's impact statement is being read out.
Okay.
Nick, thank you for your call. Look, we're going to be taking more of your calls after the break. But now, your calls on whether all criminals should be forced to appear for their sentencing. You've also been getting in touch on social media. Emil says on X, I would be concerned about the defendant using it as a grandstanding moment. Maybe they should just be forced to watch by video link. That's a very good suggestion there, actually, I think. Rimal on X made a similar point, saying that the perpetrator may disrupt proceedings and heckle the victims. Well, let's take some more of your calls now. Michelle is in London. Michelle, good morning. Welcome to the show. What are your thoughts?
Good morning to you. Love this panel. Special shout out to Henry. He's one of my favorites too. But yeah, I think that the person should be there for the sentencing, just because they were there for the crime. So it's only fit and fair for them to actually be present when victims' impact statements are actually being read out, just because it further adds insult to injuries to the victim's family. And they've already been robbed of their loved one, and then they're robbed of that moment as well. So I don't think that actually these people should get the kind of quotation luxury of just saying, you know what, no, I'm going to stay in my jail cell today. I don't want anyone to give me home truths.
Michelle, how would you deal with the disruption factor? How would you deal? I mean, Henry was saying in the break, there's footage from courts in the US where they kind of film a lot of courts where, the people being sentenced are doing gestures towards the victims, people who are clearly unrepentant of their crimes. How do you protect the victims from actually almost being abused by the person being sentenced? How would you account for that?
Maybe there should be, again, like repercussions for those kind of actions if they disrupt proceedings. Maybe they'll actually have additional time added on, or they'll be factored in, or they lose a right or a privilege some kind of way. But then also, I feel that even the people that are guilty, if they feel that in their heart they didn't do anything when they're innocent, they're not necessarily wrapping themselves in glory, acting like an animal with all cameras on them. It only proves the fact that, you know, they deserve to be behind bars. So if someone wants to actually embarrass himself and kind of roll eyes and do gestures during the impact statement, it only actually makes them look ridiculous. The family can see them for the killers that they actually are. But I do not think that they should actually be given rights to say, yeah, I don't want home truths today. I don't like being challenged, and I'm not going to have anyone change my perspective on myself, so I'm not going to go. No, you lost that right. And also, he put himself in that wheelchair. To me, I don't mean to sound callous, but he can just roll himself right into the court and actually hear what needs to be said to him. So he did it to himself.
Okay, Michelle, thank you. I want to take some more calls, but thank you for your call. Richard is in Northamptonshire. Richard, welcome to the show. What would you like to say? Richard, are you with us?
Well,
Hi.
Basically, it appears, I mean, I know it's only a straw poll on your show at the minute, but it appears everybody would like to see the convicted person in the dock to hear the comments and everything. But what we have to consider is we are actually signatories to the Human Rights Bill. And as such, we are left to the decisions made by the European Court of Human Rights, which our voters have no distinct value of actually sort of getting people in there from a judge perspective. And I'm quite sure that if it was tried to be enforced in this country, then no doubt some barristers, lawyers, solicitors will be fighting it all the way to the ECHR. And as a result, I don't think it could ever happen while we are signatories.
You think it's unenforceable, is what you're saying?
I do. I generally do, because even though the person has been convicted of a criminal offence, a very serious one at that, the fact is, under the conventions, he still has rights. And these rights will be enforced by the ECHR. Whichever way our parliament chooses to go, the electorate doesn't actually have a direct say on whether or not this could be enforced.
Okay,
Judges have the power now to get criminals to come into court, but they can't enforce the power.
Yeah, I mean, it lies in precedent. As you said, they can bring them in, but there's no specific law that gives them the actual power. Richard, good point, well made, thank you. Let's move to Julie in Dover. Julie, welcome to the show. Do you think criminals should be forced? Maybe Labour need to bring in that new specific law that gives judges the power to specifically bring someone to court to hear their sentencing?
Well, even if you have a law that forces it, it's not as easy as just saying, right, that person has to come to court. I used to work in that field. I worked in a Crown Court. And for a start, there isn't the staff to be able to do that safely. These prisoners don't want to come, so you have to use multiple members of staff. It starts in the jail. It's a drain on resources. And even if they're there, they're just going to... I've actually been in a situation where a prisoner has been forced to go into court. The prisoner is kicking off, to put it lightly.
Right.
It puts staff at risk. The family, it's not very nice for them to see as well. They're already distressed. So it's not always the best thing for everyone.
Okay, Julie, thank you for that point. I mean, that is the concern, again, for the family, whether it actually might end up being more impactful for the family to see that person either hurling abuse or resisting or shouting. And that's something that needs to be considered. But a few people have already mentioned rights being taken away from prison term. So perhaps that is an answer.
The thing in this is he got a whole life tariff, so it doesn't matter. There's no further punishment you can put on this particular case. But for other prisoners, yes, that might be some sort of deterrent.
Let's speak to Jane in Essex. Jane, am I right thinking that you used to be a prison officer?
Yeah, I used to be a prison officer, and there were times where we could use reasonable force at the governor's discretion to make someone go to court. The prison were fined if we didn't produce the prisoner, so reasonable force can be used. I've been involved in those restraints. They're not pleasant. They can put staff in danger of harm. But from my perspective, I've seen both sides of the coin, Alexis and Panel, because my daughter was a victim of crime. At the age of 12, she was sexually assaulted. And her victim impact statement, she was given the choice to go to sentencing. She was advised not to, but she did. And seeing both sides of the coin, it's given her the opportunity, brings it back, to read out those those words of how what he did to her truly impacted and how he destroyed her life that day. I think she needed that moment. Now, he did stand there and he heard every word of what he did, that she was in the, what he'd done to a child he found that day. But as a result, he wrote a letter to her afterwards. Now, she's never asked to see that letter, or I don't think she'll ever want to. But I've seen both sides of it, where using restraint can be used in court process for a judge to have their say, to have their moment, to exercise their power judicially to kind of force a prisoner or suspected criminal.
Jane, I have to leave it there. Thank you for that exceptional call. Thank you for all your calls. We'll see you after the break.